Hey, how's everyone doing? It's the I think it's the 26th of November today. Thought to give you a little update on my rocket stove that I used to heat the workshop and make it a more pleasant environment, because we're here 26th of November. Was it the 24th? Let me have a look. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so we're here 26th of November. The temperature outside is probably 3 degrees centigrade, which is in Fahrenheit. It's not pleasant. It's dull, it's grey, it's moody. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon now, so it's just about, we're losing the light, it's just about to go dark. So I've just come in the workshop for an hour. I probably wouldn't light the stove now, really. There's not much point, because I'll probably only be in here for an hour, but I shall probably be in here all day tomorrow, because it's give rain all day tomorrow. So it kind of helps. If I light this now, is what I'm saying is, if I light this today or this afternoon, then tomorrow morning there will still be a residual heat in the workshop. So this workshop heater it'll warm everything up in the workshop, and that'll retain the heat slightly overnight. So when I come in the morning, it won't be 4 degrees in here, it'll be maybe 10-12 degrees, which is much more pleasant and a quicker space to heat up anyway. So as I say, I'm doing the update on the rocket stove heater, and what have I got to report from last year. I was just looking actually on my back videos to see when I built this. I couldn't remember. I thought it was about 6 years ago, maybe, at a push. And actually looking, the first time I lit this stove was the 24th of December 2014. So it's almost 9 years to the month when this stove was first lit. I mean, if I'd known that, I'd have probably done this video on the 24th of December, but I've also got some other news that I'm going to tell you about at the end of this video. So yeah, the stove's been in operation now for 9 years. Amazing stove, utterly fantastic. I don't know what I'd do without it now. There was an initial cost to build the stove, there always is, because I mostly bought all the steel for this thing to build it. But that cost has more than paid me back. It's very efficient. Now, between this video and the last video I did, probably sometime last year, I've not done anything to the stove. I've not had to do any clean out. The riser tube, which I will show you in a minute, is functioning perfectly still. I don't think I touched the riser tube last year. It may have been the year before that, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that I actually had to do any work to the riser tube. But as far as I know, it's been 2 or 3 years since I touched it. So it's working great. I've had a look down inside the riser with the torch before I lit the stove. There's just a bit of ash in the bottom. There's no significant ash build-up inside the stove, so for the last 2 years it's not needed cleaning out. The flues are clear, everything's running fine. Firebox is good, it's all intact. This is all lined with vermiculite. You can maybe see where the vermiculite is kind of eroding away, so it's all kind of got this sculpted, moulded face to it now around the firebox, and that's purely, you know, use and heat and air moving through, which is kind of eroding it, a bit like a rock, I suppose, isn't it? A rock face. The only thing wrong with my stove at the moment is I've lost the spinning cowl on top. So I've lost the Simon cowl on the roof, on the top of the flue, and it's kind of locked in position, so it's not really spinning around. And the trouble with that is when the wind does shift direction, and it's blowing right down the cowl, it sort of makes it difficult to light the fire. It's not obviously not doing that today because the fire's lit up and it's pulling well. So this is what I'm burning at the moment. These are all bits of pallet boarding. I have got logs, but I don't think they're dry enough to burn this year. They'll probably be dry enough next year to burn. As you can see, it pulls very well. doesn't really give off any smoke into the room. I can guarantee now that the flue is giving off zero smoke at all. So I'll come back in a minute when I get a little bit more heat into this, guys, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. Come back, guys. I just wanted to clean that glass on the inside before the stove got too hot. That was about maybe 10-15 minutes ago. So those initial sticks you saw me put in, and also the few bits of wood, bits of pallet that were there to the right of the stove, that is all I've put in the firebox. This is cascading heat out this thing at the moment. As you can see here, this little line, as you can see here, this little chalk line on this temperature gauge, that's where the stove maxes out. It never gets any hotter than that, and that's, you know, right over on the scale. So I don't, once it reaches around this point, I don't try and achieve any more heat, because that is the most heat this thing's going to put out. It's spilling heat from the exchanger all the time, this stove, so you can't really get it any hotter than that, because this is a big exchanger for the size of the firebox. So I'm just going to put a bit more of this pallet wood in now. I'll put a couple of them blocks in, and because the inside of that firebox is now really hot, this wood ignites and burns without any difficulty whatsoever. I'll take you and show you in the riser tube in a second. I'll show you now actually before it gets too much flame going in, because then I won't be able to take the top off. Let's have a look down there into the riser tube. There we are. You can see what's happening there. There's no massive heat in the riser as yet. There is a bit of colour at the bottom, but burning the stove hard, just got to watch the temperature, burning the stove hard, the bottom of the heat riser will glow yellow, which, you know, it's kind of up to temperature. I haven't got my thermometer, my handheld thermometer with me today, because it's in my little cabin, because I have just built another rocket stove. Well, it's not a rocket stove, it's what I call a rocket stove hybrid. And I've just finished that stove, and I'm currently fitting it to the cabin. This is why I've come in the workshop tonight, because I've just got a cowl to make for the chimney, and a couple of plates to make to encapsulate the flue where it goes through the side of the cabin. So yeah, I've just lit the fire to do that. But I can tell you now that the temperature on the top of this stove will be around 350 degrees. The sides will be about 200 degrees. The workshop feels warm already. In fact, being here around this area is hot. The back of the workshop will obviously be cooler, but the two blocks I have just put in, I'll be in here now for maybe an hour. Those two blocks, when I shut this stove down very shortly, which I'll do now actually. So I'm closing off the primary air supply to this stove now, and that prevents almost any air coming into the firebox now, because the air comes up the sides of this firebox in a void, and then it spills in through the top. So I've prevented the vast majority of that air. There's just a little trickle coming in. So because this firebox is so hot that any wood you put in now, it immediately starts to heat up and give off gas, and it's the gas that's burning on the wood. That gas moves through into that riser tube, which is red hot. That base of that riser tube is also fed with a secondary air supply. So when the gas meets that heat and the oxygen, it ignites inside the bottom of the riser tube. So I'll just show you in there now, because it's doing exactly that. So hot on here now. People probably don't believe how hot this thing gets. So we're just burning gas now off the wood. And that is it. And the air supply comes in from the top of the picture, kind of up here. So the air supply is coming in here, and you can maybe see it. I don't know, you can't always see it, but in effect that's what's now happening, because that is what's happening in the firebox. The gas, you can see there's virtually no flame going into the riser. What's burning in the riser is gas. So you understand that, I'm sure you do. And that is when this stove is burning at its most efficient. when the firebox is hot, when the riser is hot, and when this is kind of acting like a gasifier that's just burning the gases, it means that the fuel lasts an awful long time in the firebox, and it cools the stove down to a degree because there's not all that primary air moving through and blowing heat up the flue. It slows it all down, so it's slowing down the air movement and gases through the whole stove and the flue system, so that the body of the stove will release more heat, and it does that extremely efficiently. It really does. So that, as I was saying, the 2 blocks I have just put on, I'll be in here for about another hour. I could comfortably not put any more wood in now for 2-3 hours, because this will give off enough heat to heat this workshop. In probably in half an hour the entire workshop will be up around 25 degrees centigrade. If I just keep firing wood in, all that happens is the temperature increases and increases, and I'm just wasting fuel because I don't need to burn it. I'm happy if the workshop's at 20 centigrade, it's more than hot enough. I'll put 1 more block in. There's probably room in there for 1 more block. There is, yeah. So that will be it. I won't put any more wood in that stove tonight, and that will probably burn. What time is it now? It's maybe about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That will probably burn until about 8 or 9 o'clock tonight, that now. This temperature will drop back once the gases have burnt off that wood. That temperature will start to drop back, but this will carry on pumping out anywhere between 150 and 200 centigrade now for the next sort of 3, 4, 5 hours, something like that, by which time the workshop will be cooking. Very pleased with it. So I have had a few since I built this, as I say, since I built this in 2014, there have been a few little changes to it which I have done. I think I'm on the third, maybe the 3rd riser tube now, because that is the part of these stoves that is vulnerable, the riser tube. The first one was a cast refractory riser tube which worked well for a couple of years, maybe 3, but eventually it disintegrated and it just couldn't take the heat. Maybe it was a mixture, maybe it was the way I mixed it, I don't know. I moved from that to a ceramic base, so a Firebrick ceramic base, and a vermiculite riser sat on top of it. That is where I am at now with this, and it is the same base I did maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it is still holding up perfectly well. The bulk of the heat in these rocket stoves, the vast majority of wear and tear you're going to get, is the first sort of 9, 10, 12 inches of the riser tube. That is where all that severe heat is coming in, where the gases are coming in. You'll get a yellow ring of heat around the base. That is where the most structural damage is going to occur on these. So if you make that base, that first 12 inches bomb proof, you can pretty much put whatever you want on top. I've made these for years and years now. You can use steel riser tubes, cast iron riser tubes, stainless steel riser tubes. I've tried all of them. Nothing works as well or is as long lasting as sort of the ceramics and the board materials. They just last longer, they do. The steel is exposed to huge temperatures, you know, in the riser, approaching 1300 degrees centigrade. It's cooling down, it's getting moisture, it's getting water being driven off the wood that's circulating around that comes out the flue. And it's cooling down, it's heating up, it's cooling down, it's doing that all the time, and that's where it suffers at the base. So since I've used that white lightweight ceramic brick in the base of this, it's been fantastic. Currently the flue, I changed it 2 or 3 years ago, didn't I? I just made it straight up and out, because I used to have the flue running from out, that's where the flue exits there, right down in that bottom corner. So it used to run along behind the bench, and it came along, came back up, came here, and then went out. So I was capturing more heat from that flue, and it did work really well. The only trouble was that flue system there was a condensation trap, so that moisture being driven off the wood would collect in that pipe, and it would get smelly and stinky, and eventually it completely corroded that pipe away. So I then changed it to a flue going, I knocked a hole in the wall into the forging room, and I went straight through, and then I took the flue along in there and then came back out thinking that that would heat up put enough heat into the forging room to make a difference. It did raise the temperature in there a little bit, but eventually the stainless steel liner flue I was using, that destroyed itself again with the condensation and the acids in the water that was being driven off the wood. That stainless steel flue just started pitting with holes. It was at that point I just decided to bring the flue straight up from the bottom and out the roof, and I'm happy I made that decision. I know I'm losing a little bit of heat up through the flue, but the heat output on this stove is more than enough to heat the workshop, which is what it was built for. I think I definitely will have to clean this stove out next year, so it just involves taking the top off, getting a hoover in and sucking all the fine ash that sort of comes off the top of the riser and collects in the bottom of the exchanger, but it's not blocking the flue at the moment. So so that job can wait until next summer when I will do it. I'll just inspect the riser next summer, but to me the riser looks absolutely fine and I'm not looking for work. You know, I'll just do a clean out and put the lid back on and that's it. This is an ash can on the bottom, so this is where the ashes collect. Do you know, I probably only empty that twice a year because I actually leave the ash, I let the ash can fill up and I'll let the ash just build up in the bottom of the actual firebox. And then every 3 or 4 days, maybe when it's burning every day, every 3 or 4 days, I will literally just put my hand in the bottom of the firebox before I light the stove, obviously, and I'll scoop out maybe 2 handfuls of ash and nails and just chuck them in the bin, and that is all the clean out it needs. It's just a faff because I'm burning pallet wood and crappy old wood with nails in. The nails the nails go between the bars in the bottom and they get stuck and they stop the can pulling out, so it's just easier to scoop the nails out the bottom. There's no way around that. If you're burning naily wood, you're gonna end up with nails in the ash. I do actually sieve the ash, so I sieve the nails out of the ash and then I use the ash on the garden and on the allotments and at various other places. Well, my biggest news is that I've just built a hybrid rocket stove. I've not seen this done before. It possibly has, I don't know, but it was a concept in my head that I've just built and it's been tweaked and messed about with. And as I said before, I have literally just yesterday took it to the cabin at the allotment and put it in the cabin and just kind of jerry-rigged the flue and I lit it. And I am absolutely and totally amazed how efficient it is, how clean it burns and how much heat it's putting out. It's only a little thing. It's not even as big as this firebox. It's actually smaller than this firebox with just a door on the front, and the top is pumping out 500 degrees centigrade. The firebox is 5 inches square by 10 or 12 inches long, and that gives 500 degrees on the exchanger of the stove. It's just worked out better than I thought. I've been putting the videos of the build and the concept and the drawings and the building process and the test burns. I've been putting all that on my Patreon channel just to give my patrons something back, you know, for the support they give me. So I think there's 3 or 4 videos in, and I'm about to do the last video where I do the final test burn and show just how amazing this little stove is. And one of my patrons, we've been having comments and discussions about it. One of my patrons, whose name is XJ9, I think, he had an absolutely brilliant idea which hadn't really occurred to me. And in a way, his idea sort of adds a riser tube to this stove. Now, I would have tried that out, but I just couldn't do it because the stove is so small and compact that I didn't have them extra few inches I needed to add this element to make a riser tube within the stove. Since lighting the stove, I don't need that extra element because it is burning so efficiently and so clean. Nothing comes out the flue except condensation. When the condensation is driven off the wood, which happens really quickly, there's nothing coming out the flue whatsoever. I also put a kettle on the stove. 2 minutes after lighting it, the kettle actually boils at the same time as it does on my petrol Coleman, which I was just gobsmacked about. So wouldn't it, putting out 500 degrees on top of the stove. So I'm going to do a video on that little stove when I fit it in the next, either tomorrow or the day after. I'm going to do the final fit on that stove and flue. I've got to make the cowl, or start to attempt to make the cowl for the top of the flue, because when it rains over there, it rains, you know, it's really exposed, the site. The rain will go down that flue and it will run down and it will end up on the floor at the bottom of the cabin. So I just need something to stop that. So I brought the flue home with me tonight, and I'm going to do a bit of work on that. But yeah, I look forward to showing you my new little concept stove. It's so easy to build. It is ridiculously easy compared to building a rocket stove and the riser and the secondary air and the primary air channels and the preheated air and all this business. It's so much easier. So I'll show you that, guys. I'll do the video in a day or two. It'll probably be out in the next week. But until then, I'll see you later. I'll give you another look in here. We'll have a look in the riser and we'll call it quits. All right. Thanks to my patrons once again. You guys will get that that next video in the next 3 days probably, and we'll do a full depth talk about what's happened with the latest changes I made and how those few simple changes have made such a massive difference. Bye for now.